we do run for office, oh, they're trying to instill their religion on us. So it's not that I want your approval, not that I want to win in your eyes, but that's really what we're dealing with here, you know. In my own experiences, being an outspoken member of the Muslim community, and Pastor Luke really touched upon it in his opening remarks, is that hate it's not just about hate, it's sexism, it's the racism, sexism, it's all intertwined. Some people really have a hard time dealing with a woman who steps out in a leadership role, especially if she has something on her head, or especially if she has dark skin. They really, really have a hard time dealing with that. So me, running for office, in my experience, I've received 2 death threats, numerous hate letters delivered to my home address, even from people from out of state, with borderline threats to my security. I take the letters to a lawyer and I'm told, look, there's no direct threat to your safety, there's nothing you can do. So that's what I'm left with. I received one lovely letter in the mail saying that it was ridiculous that I would run for office, I need to go back to Africa. And there were also, embedded in that letter, were also some sexual remarks as well. So you see how the racism and the sexism is so intertwined when we're talking about hate speech here. And we know that in August of 2018, our own mosque here, Masjid Abu Bakr al-Sadiq, was desecrated with bacon that was thrown throughout our parking lot and right at the entrance, a nice lovely stack of it, right at the entrance to our mosque. And then I was on the board at the time, and there were many members of the mosque who did not want us to tell anybody about it. They feared if we reported it, if we told people, it was just going to inspire other people to do it. So that's also kind of what Dee touched on, is a lot of the instances that are not being reported. But I said, no, people have to know that this has happened. And we know a month before that, a rock was thrown through the window of a synagogue. We also have seen in this state the rise in anti-Semitism as well. Acts of violence against members of the LGBTQ community. I wish members of the Jewish community and the LGBT community could be joining us here up on this panel tonight. And as a person with a visual impairment, well, I guess I can represent the disability community in some extent. But I wanted to close with this, is that actually in this very space, so earlier this year, I believe after the ChIrch terrorist attack, I stood before several local elected officials and asked them to publicly denounce white supremacy. I asked that of local state representatives. And only one to this date has publicly denounced white supremacy, and that's Tina Liebling. You pair that with the fact that we have a federal representative in Congress who is openly antagonistic to members of the Muslim community. So where does that leave us here in Southeast Minnesota? When we have representatives who are, too afraid of losing their votes, love standing right there and straddling the fence, and don't want to rock the boat, and call out white supremacy for what it is. I'm still waiting for that, and So, that is where we stand. Thank you.
Well, let me first of all thank the wonderful members of the First Unitarian Universalist Church for opening up your doors to all of us. This is your house of worship, and yet you've opened the doors so we can come have an important community conversation. It's a very gracious thing you're doing, and we're grateful for it. I want you to know that. I want you to know that we're very proud of and grateful to your pastor, Reverend Luke Stevens Royer, and I hope you put your hands together for him. I want to thank my fellow panelists for all eloquent and authentic in their remarks. And I think I just saw Senator Carla Nelson join us, and just want to thank you for being here, Senator. And would you all put your hands together for Senator Nelson? This is your meeting. I'm not going to talk long because we want to hear from you. I do want to make a few observations. One is that we are experiencing a worldwide phenomenon of intolerance. In Brazil, the president openly campaigns against LGBTQ people and indigenous people. In Spain, that is, the president, not the president, but the leader of the, minority party is really kind of climbed aboard by a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric. And I'm not talking about questioning immigration policy. I'm talking about, hey, there's a difference. Hungary, Poland. My wife and I were in England, not more this summer, and we were openly told that, look, anti-immigrant organizing is going on, and it's not a policy discussion. It's not about the wisdom of a policy. It's about they don't belong here. And in fact, a lot of that Brexit debate, this is an important conversation that's happening about who's included. In fact, there was a horrible knifing incident that occurred there in London the other day. And one of the people who stopped the knifer was a Polish immigrant, who is one of the people who some folks don't want there, which is interesting. And of course, we all know about New Zealand, and we also know it's going on. So I don't want anyone to think, oh my God, what's going on in Rochester? No, this is a problem that we're dealing with all over the world. I have my ideas about why. I want to hear yours, but I just don't want you to think. And I tell you, we had one of these sessions in St. Cloud, and this was only a few weeks before that. There was that New York Times article talking about intolerance in St. Cloud. And I wanted to make sure that the people in St. Cloud knew that we weren't there because of some New York Times article. This is a general problem. It's a problem that knows no party. All of us should be able to agree that we can debate taxes and spending, but can we all also agree in liberty and justice for all? Liberty and justice for all. I just wanted to make a separate point. What we are talking about is crime. We are talking about serious danger. What happened in Tree of Life, which is just a little bit more than a year ago? People murdered at prayer in Pittsburgh. How high? People murdered at prayer. At Mother Emanuel Church, y'all remember that one? In South Carolina? Wednesday night, Dylan Roof sits down at prayer meeting, goes through the whole prayer meeting, Pastor, with those believers, and then murders them. And I've been to Mother Emanuel Church. The bullet holes are still there. That church has been standing there since the 1780s, 90s. And, Abu Bakr Siddiq here, but also Darul Farouk in Bloomington. There was a bombing. Think about a bombing of a house of worship in Minnesota, an hour's drive from here. And then, of course, the Latino community has not been spared. The guy came from Dallas, went down to El Paso, and shot at people because they're taking our jobs. And again, I don't mind having a conversation about immigration. I'm happy to do it. We can talk about it. You can vote how you want, I'll vote how I want. But the guns and the knives and the bullets and the bombs have no place. And what I'm doing is having a series of conversations around the state with, yes, prosecutors and police and sheriffs about how they can more effectively enforce the law. Does the hate crime statute need to be redrafted to make it more accessible? What about training? What about documentation? But I'm going to be honest with y'all. As Minnesota's top prosecutor, that ain't going to save us. You are. Connection between neighbors is what's going to do it. I think it was Dee who properly said that these people who traffic in hate, organized hate, it's not that they, and I think Pastor, you said the same thing. It's not that they suddenly arrived. They've been here. But for a long time, maybe a solid 30, 40, 50, 60 years, they knew that they better stay on the margin and in the shadows. But for some reason, they now think they can come out and just act in the old kind of way. Let me say this about anti-Semitism. Look, when those guys were marching in Charlottesville, they were not saying Muslims will not replace us. They were not saying Latinos will not replace us. They were not saying blacks will not replace us. They were not saying gays will not replace us. They were saying Jews will not replace us. Because there's this conspiracy lie that these rich, powerful people who you don't know and have never seen are controlling everything, and they're Jews. And blacks and Latinos and Muslims are too stupid and inferior to actually organize a movement to help improve their lives. So it must be the Jews. You understand what I'm saying? The anti-Semitism operates in an interesting kind of way. And there's a book called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It's a total forgery. It acts like it's written by Jewish leadership. It's not. It's a made-up thing. But I can tell you that the rise in anti-Semitism should be a very, very concerning sign for all of us, because not only did it result in literally, the Holocaust was just the greatest pogrom. Anybody know what a pogrom is? Heard that term? It's just the worst one. There were many others before, for the hundreds of years before. So, well, thank you for the correction now. And so the thing is that this is important to bear in mind. And I can also tell you this, a lot of people in the Latino community will tell you, my wife's from Colombia, and I said, you know what, how is this hate crime thing affecting the Latino community? She told me long before El Paso, yeah, it happens, but people, if they're not documented, they don't want to say anything. And yet, we see this explosion of death and murder. I'm telling you that if all of us in this room stand up and say, this is not going to be tolerated, those people will slide back into the shadow. But if good people do nothing, they're going to be bolder. You saw them walking around with tiki torches talking about Jews will not replace us. They've got more plans than that. Let me just say this as I also wrap up. Do y'all mind if I'm candid for a moment? White supremacists don't like white people. They don't. Did you know that the number one group dying by suicide by guns is white men? Did you know that? You want to know the number one group who's dying at their own hands with handguns, it's white men. Have they ever stood up and said, what are we going to do for our brothers who are so hurt in their heart that they take their own lives? They don't give a rip. I would say something else, but I'm in a church. Did you know that there was a study through Princeton University that looked at every demographic group and their morbidity numbers. They looked at young black men. Now, you turn on the tube and you hear all about them shooting each other up, right? You hear about that? But they are. You hear about women and breast cancer. You hear about all the groups and all this stuff. The number one group that is the morbidity numbers are literally getting worse are non-college white men of suicide, opioids, cirrhosis. There is something that's not working for our fellow Americans in this category. Do you hear Richard Spencer, alt-right Richard Spencer, saying he's concerned? He's not concerned. And you know, no, look, I don't want to sound too political because I don't want to politicize this, but I will say this. This idea of talking about healthcare access. We know that white people are literally having inferior health outcomes in Tennessee compared to white people in Kentucky. Because one has expanded Medicaid and the other one refuses.